Well, good morning, gentlemen. I don't know why you would clap before I talk, but yeah, men of faith. So, I just want to talk today a little bit about waiting on God, and I call it the secret strength of kings. And this really stemmed from something that happened a couple Sunday mornings ago, Sunday, October 13th. So, laying in bed with my wife, one wife, not monotony, and my mind was just flooded with thoughts, just, busyness. We've all been there, right? But I've developed over the years kind of a sensitivity to when I'm living in God's peace, His shalom, and when, I'm making too much noise with my own mind. In fact, that morning, the Lord kind of spoke to me from a, deep theological poet, and this is the phrase I heard is, "Don't let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy." Seriously, God can speak through an Eagles song. And He did. So laying in bed anyway, Joy and I had, we've had just a really great run the last 10 years. We've gone from being completely broke and wiped out to doing very well, very successful business. And so it opens up tons of opportunities. And I had gotten my calendar just packed full of really good things. I mean, good godly things. And that morning I'm processing in bed, and she literally feels me processing, says, "What's going on?" Because she could feel the energy in the room, And I told her, and I said, I feel like the sound of my own wheels is driving me crazy, and it's really time to just say no to some things. So we actually made the decision that morning to cancel like 3 trips. I was supposed to be on a trip here, and I mean, these are like once-in-a-lifetime type opportunities. So if any of you guys are golfers, I was actually supposed to be at Pinehurst Golf Resort playing with John Maxwell and some of his leadership and about 50 guys. And that's how powerfully the Lord said, shut it down. And so that morning, because of this intense conversation we were having, actually we weren't going to make it to service on time here, so we streamed it. And I just couldn't believe, because Pastor Steve here was speaking out of the book of Habakkuk. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but that's the way I say it. And Habakkuk starts off with this statement that, the burden that he saw. And then he goes on to describe conditions in that day that you got to go read that book that are pretty similar to what is going on in our nation and literally in our world right now. And just to back up, the reason I felt that we needed to make some decisions about shutting some things down is back in early 2020, the Lord started in the secret place, in my quiet time of waiting on Him, started giving me these little hints at how I was to pray. And He gave me about things going on in our nation. Yeah, the elections are part of it, but so much more. And I've been on a kind of a lonely prayer journey for about 4 years, walking up in the hills and processing the pictures that He gave me. And I got to tell you, through that process, I'm not at all scared about what's coming, where we're going. And I think I've seen some stuff on the other side of whatever level of conflict we have, and I'm going to tell you, it's good. It's going to be a really good season for God's people. But I think there might be a little bit of heavy lifting to get there. So anyway, I felt like I needed to shut these other things down so I could maintain my watch, because I've been given this kind of watchman prayer assignment, and I felt myself being pulled away by these other really good things. And so we just said, no, we're not going to do it. So Steve's talking about Habakkuk, and again, chapter 1's the burden that he saw, and I'd seen a burden for this nation. And but then he said in the beginning of chapter 2, after laying it all out before the Lord, he said, "I will stand my watch and set myself on the rampart," which is the tower, the high place, "and watch to see what God would say." And this was like the script that was unfolding in my life right up to that very morning, like 20 minutes before we started listening to this message. So He's got my attention. So listening to that. So Steve talked about Habakkuk's pilgrimage to the higher ground of watching and waiting on God. So now, I don't know whether Habakkuk, literally went to a tower to watch and see what God would say, because you don't necessarily have to go up to a tower. But there is a place. There's a place we go and meet with God. And so this reminded me, what Steve was talking about reminded me of a little book that had really meant a lot to me. And it just popped into my mind out of nowhere. A little book called Waiting on God by Andrew Murray. And, this is just a power-packed gem. And it reminded me of a time when Joy and I were going through a deep, long wilderness season of testing, which was the very worst and the very best years of my life, because I learned this reality of waiting on God and being strengthened. I learned this secret strength of kings. So I want to read you. So I opened this book. So this isn't my copy. My copy's all weathered. And I looked at this and said, man, it doesn't look like the one I used. But I went and found it in my closet, and I opened it up. And I just want to read what I wrote, part of what I wrote to my wife. I gave this book to Joy. And so it says, Dearest Joy, my faithful partner in waiting, it has been extra special to me to go through this season of waiting and waiting and waiting and watching the Almighty clothe us in His strength, the strength of His love. And this is what I wrote. The season is changing, and we are mounting up with eagle's wings and newfound strength. May we never forget the lessons learned, nor the habits forged in the divine place of waiting only upon God. For He alone truly is our expectation. May we never stray from the highest place of simply dwelling in His presence, gazing and inquiring. It's just a double blessing to discover this one thing, life with the love of my life. I was blown away because, some of the language in there is exactly what I was hearing laying in bed that morning. And then when Steve started teaching, some of the exact phrases like the higher place of waiting on God. Now, just to put this in context, this was a season, I won't go into, I won't describe my face plant in full, but it was having lost, millions of dollars for the second time in my life. I'm not a real fast learner, so I get to repeat classes sometime. But finding God in that place, several things I would do. I was memorizing Psalms and just learning to live in the Psalms. And I would encourage you, just learn to live in the Psalms. It's every circumstance, emotion, every aspect of life you can imagine is found in that book. And you have King David, modeling for us how to walk out this life in God. It's just amazing. So that was a reality to me. But I remember probably for a period of a year sleeping in our master bedroom closet for two reasons. One, I was praise sleeping. And I didn't want to wake Joy up. So it was dark. So I knew when I was sleeping I could sleep deeply. But I would wake up, and sometimes it was terror, and sometimes it was the Lord just tapping me and saying, hey, I got something to speak to you. But I'd have this little book with a little reader's light and my Bible. And I'd wake up and I'd say, okay, devil, if you're going to keep me from sleeping, I'm going to just meditate on God's word. And so this little book, I use this book, it was like a vitamin pill for me. But many, many nights just laying in the closet going through, and there's such important gems in there. But so it was interesting to me that when I wrote in this June 17th, 2012, and I wrote that the season is changing and we are mounting up with wings. And, this was, I'm thinking back on this was 2 years, no, it was about a year and a half before we actually hit the very low point. Circumstantially. I remember pulling over the side of the road and crying like a baby because it was I won't describe everything that happened and converged at once, but it was a terrible, terrible time. And I just pulled over and said, okay, God, I love you. I trust you. I know what you've told me, but I can't do this any longer. And there was still another several months before the actual breakthrough would start in the natural. But what I want to say is this strengthening of the heart happened in the quiet place. So the Lord started speaking to me in 2012, actually, or 2011, November of 2011, is when in these times of waiting on God and spending time in the Psalms and just not read, but just chew on it. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. And if I felt myself wanting, I would say, this is illegal for me. This says I shall not want. Lord, get me to that. Just really grinding out in His presence with these principles from the Psalms. But in 2011 is when He spoke to my spirit in that quiet place of waiting. And he said, the turnaround begins now. You're going to recover all. So it was you guys know what I'm talking about, right? It was a done deal in here. I mean, faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's like before the thing manifests, it becomes a reality in your heart. It's as real as this. And so that's why I could write then. I said, this newfound strength that we have, and this season is changing. And it's like somebody looking from the outside would say, dude, the season isn't even close to changing yet, but it was because of this strengthening that comes from waiting on the Lord. So Isaiah 40:31, you could probably, some of the words I wrote to Joy kind of come out of that. So that's where they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles, shall run and not be weary and walk and not faint. Well, I felt that strength. I felt that mounting up, and that's what I wrote to her. It wasn't just I was trying to be cute and poetic. It was like this had been such a living experience for me and for her going through it with me that it was like, honestly, it's addictive. It's an addicting way to live. Psalm 27:14, David says at the very end of that psalm, wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. It's just a given. So what is waiting on the Lord? The word wait is, the Hebrew word is kavah, and it means, it literally, it's a picture that you get as a binding together or a twisting together, and it's also to look eagerly with hope and expectation. And the picture that comes to my mind is my dog. I'll sit down and put a piece of meat on my knee or on the arm of the chair and just sit there, and he will sit, okay, he'll see the meat and he'll think, okay, that's the reward. Okay, that's the thing hoped for. But he sits and you guys have dogs, right? Sits and stares at me intently. And it's like this, it's like he's got this hopeful expectation that he's going to get the piece of meat, but he's not even focused on the piece of meat. He's not even focused on what he's going to get. He's focused on me. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's what waiting on God is like. Yes, we start the journey of waiting on God usually out of desperation, something that we need. But by the time we get into his presence and dial everything else down a bit, it's really more about seeking the one we inquire than what we're inquiring of. And I think that was David's strength. I think David found that he could live that way. So I'm way off my notes, but that's okay. Notes are only good for me to prepare. So in the secret place, this is where God tells you secrets. It's one of the things he does. So he gave me the secret. He goes, by the way, you're going to get out of this mess, and the turnaround starts now. But then I had to walk that out. So another thing I just want to bring up here is in that place of the presence of the Lord and waiting on him. I had the word in my spirit. I had the promise that it was turnaround time. All that was left was to incubate it, staying in that place of waiting, but then going out and deploying what he had given me. So there was definitely steps I needed to take. Psalm 40:13 says, this is kind of what happened. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined to me and heard my cry. He also brought me out of a horrible pit. Now get this, and set my feet upon a rock and established my steps. So what it doesn't say is that overnight I heard this word and the next day I had a successful business. It says he lifted me out of the pit on the inside before my feet were ever out of the pit. But then it said he set my feet on this solid ground and then he established my steps. And I love that about God because it was this intimate walking out of what the word was that was in my spirit that came from the strengthening of waiting on the Lord. So it was a 2-year process before I actually ever ate the fruit of the breakthrough that had happened in my heart 2 years prior, laying on the closet floor. So I just want to say this is the secret strength. This is how David lived his life. He was a king. He wasn't just any old king. He was a king's king. We say man's man. David was a king's king. In fact, David is the king upon whose throne Jesus Christ sits. Okay, that's who this dude was. We'd do well to pay attention to what he has to say. But David said that with all that he did, all the kinging that he did out there, David said in Psalm 27:4, and this became my life passage, and that is, one thing have I desired, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. Goes on to say how God sets his feet, lifts him up above his enemies and sets him on a high rock. Again, there's that high tower. There's that place above the fray of circumstances where we're listening, we're hearing God. There's that rampart that Habakkuk goes to so he can watch and see what the Lord will say. And David, but here's the thing, David didn't stay in the prayer room, okay? David took what he learned and he acquired in the prayer room, the strength and the instruction from the Lord, but then he went out and deployed it. He went and did king stuff, like conquering enemies of God. And we're invited to this, guys. Scripture says that we are kings and priests. Not we will be kings and priests. He says he redeemed us and made us kings and priests unto our God, and we shall reign on the earth. We're supposed to reign in this life, and in doing so, we bring God's ways and his power into all of creation, into every realm, until the whole loaf is leavened. That's what we're here for. And so I just want to encourage you. I need to bring this in for a landing, or Al will throw stuff at me or silence my mic. But I just want to say this is a living reality it's for us. David didn't do this. The Lord didn't have him write as much as he wrote so that we could look and say, wow, good David, what a hero. Man, it would be something if we could be like him, but we can't. It's for us, guys. This is the way we're supposed to live. And once you taste the desirability, so the Lord gave me this little statement many years ago, and is that David said, one thing I desire, that will I seek. That's a principle of life, guys. We seek what we desire. If we desire sexual gratification, we seek it. We know how to seek it. If we're hungry, we desire food, we know how to go seek it. The secret here is experiencing the desirability of God to where he becomes the primary desire, and then that becomes the core of our living. Because it's a living reality. Once you've connected with God at this level, it's just, you can't go back. You can't live any other way. So James 4:8 says, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. And I remember the Holy Spirit asking me about probably 2 decades ago, and he asked me, how near? And I said, yeah, how near, Lord? That was kind of an open-ended, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. And the response that I heard in that still small voice was, you decide. Because he said, God says, you draw near to me and I'll draw near to you. Well, how near? Well, you decide. And I really believe that's his invitation to us this morning. So, is to start building that history with God. And this is one way to draw near to God, waiting on him and spending this time in the secret place. So, as I was preparing, I just sensed that some may be feeling a little behind the curve, or like, they'd missed the boat on developing a history in God, because some of us have done this for 40 years, have a history with God, and we know how to hear his voice, and we know where to go in his word to get this strengthening and this nourishment. And he just encouraged me. So that this past Sunday morning, I stepped out on our front porch, and just these trees that we had planted were just glorious, these spruce trees and these maple trees, and I looked at them, and for one, they were just beautiful. And the second thing was, I remembered this little instruction, and it's, maybe you guys know the answer to this, but I had planted these trees when we first moved, a year after we moved to Colorado. So 7 years ago, I had planted them, and they're like 25 feet tall. They're just beautiful trees. And so here's what the little riddle. When's the best time to plant a tree? As somebody shouted out. 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Okay, you guys get it. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Yeah, baby. So if you feel like, man, I've failed, I'm in the camp. That's why I got woken up 2 Sunday mornings ago. But I got to tell you, man, start today. We can start today, honestly. So there's a couple questions if you want to put those up. And I don't need to read them to you. But I'm going to just encourage you, be super honest. And even if you're not totally honest with your table, take the questions and be honest with yourself and take them before the Lord. And so that's all I got. But bless you guys.